And there we go. All right. Good evening, everybody. Matt Geary here for the Geek Pride cast on this Sunday evening. We have a full accompaniment of people this week. Yes, we have a guest as well. We'll get to them at the end. But tonight we have Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening.
We have Mark Canty.
Hola.
We have Jonjo Cosgrove.
Buongiorno.
And welcome back, Alex Davis.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So, Alex, what's been going on since we saw you last? What's going on?
Quite a lot. Been busy times. Been great fun. Just had our Paris Cinema Film Festival here in Derby, which I was quite involved in, which was great. And it's so good to kind of just now, after the last year and a half, be getting rolling on events again. I can't tell you how excited I am to get back into the kind of convention scene and getting events rolling.
What is Paris Cinema?
Pardon?
What is this Paris Cinema Festival?
Paris Cinema. Basically, it is Derby's anything goes sort of genre film festival, basically. So it runs every year. Last year was virtual. This year was physical, thankfully, which is really nice. But really a bit of everything, a bit of sci-fi, a bit of fantasy, a bit of horror, an awful lot of stuff that falls between cracks. And just very open to all kinds of different films and submissions and oddities. We had a bit of a video nasties thread, which was great fun. One of the highlights of the weekend was we had a Mary Whitehouse kind of cardboard cutout saying ban this filth, which just went down tremendously all weekend. It was all selfies and, people just found it hilarious. So Mary was one of the stars of the show for sure. It's just very kind of different and very sort of what's the word? I think you get a lot of festivals that have like a very clear sort of genre definition, but I think you come to something like Paris Cinema and every film is really quite different. So I think that's the thing that's exciting about it. So that was my first kind of in-person event in absolutely ages. So just nice to sort of see some people, as much as anything.
When was the last time we saw you? When were you on the podcast last?
I think it was. It must have been a couple of years ago. So I've not been on during the whole kind of the pandemic era, if we dare give it that name. I think it may have been pre the last Edgelip potentially, which would have been 2019. It's been a while. Yeah. So it's it's been
a time of which we dare not speak.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. Well, the time I did an awful lot of this as a little kind of box in the corner of a screen. Teaching at university and everything was a very different experience. I can reassure you that. It's been an adventure. But I'm doing a bit more at the university here in Derby, which is fantastic. And planning towards the UK Ghost Story Festival. That's my next big adventure, which should be really cool. So it's all go. It's been busy, and I'd love to say in a way that the whole sort of pandemic era was quieter, but it never really was. I think I sort of taken the opportunity to take my foot off the gas a bit, but it's not really my style. So there you go.
All right, so tell us about the UK Ghost Story Festival then. So what's it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I've always been a big lover of ghost stories, something I really sort of grew up with. And I think kind of for me, it's really interesting as like a horror fan is how kind of accessible and how sort of I hesitate to use the word respected ghost stories are, but that's kind of is what I mean, really. And you go back to M.R. James and Henry James and Charles Dickens and Le Fanu and kind of all these kind of really sort of highly respected authors. The ghost story has this kind of real sort of cachet as a sort of supernatural, sort of subtle kind of horror that I think is really interesting. I also think has kind of undergone a bit of a resurgence lately. I think it's been really interesting seeing people like Laura Purcell and Andrew Michael Hurley and Anita Frank and some of the kind of new Neil Spring, some of the newer writers kind of coming through on that scene. I think is really exciting. And I was just sort of looking around thinking, I don't think I was really doing anything like it, or kind of certainly not on the sort of scale that I'm trying to do it. I'm sure someone will probably correct me at some point and say, well, actually, Alex, but if it's out there, I've missed it. I can only apologise for that. But certainly felt like something that Derby was a good candidate for, because being the most haunted city in the UK by numerous reports, it felt like a good fit to go for it. And we've got 3 days of events, and that's coming up 26th to 28th November, and 24 activities over the 3 days. I say 24. I may well be programming more because we've already had so much demand. So I'm going to have to be using that spare space I had booked just in case already, which I think is a good sign. So that should be.
There's quite a few horror festivals in the UK. I mean, there's HorrorCon for starters, but ghost stories are very different to horror stories, aren't they? I mean, there's overlap, but they are in some ways almost distinct from each other.
Yeah, I sort of see it as a subgenre in a way. I think, I watch and read kind of the whole gamut of horror. Really, I'll sort of face up to anything. I mean, if anyone has ever read any of my extreme horror reviews over at Film Gutter, I'll take on anything. I will have a good, I may watch a little bit of it through my fingers, but I will have a go at most things. So I'm not afraid of something that isn't subtle. But I really like the ghost stories because of that subtlety, and I think that makes them more accessible to people. Like it's a lot, and I'm a mad horror fan, but I do understand why some people wouldn't like horror. Like I do get that when someone says to me, "I don't really like horror," it's like, well, that's fine. I get that. For like some people don't like to go on the tallest roller coaster at the fairgrounds. Some people don't like to be frightened. Yeah, like, do I really want to scare myself or not? And it probably is more, probably most people would probably prefer not to scare themselves, in fairness, but I do get that. But I think ghost story is a far more kind of subtle form, and M.R. James described it fabulously as a pleasing terror, which is a term that I just love. It's kind of this sort of satisfying little chill down the spine, rather than it is, I'm going to be like up all night terrified, or I'm going to be absolutely, have horrible images burned into my brain forever. It is something that is quieter. It's more about mood and atmosphere. So I think to me it is subgenres. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's a really good word for it. I think when you go back to
it, mellows the jaggies out if it's more intimate because you're not so highly strung.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think intimacy is a good word, because when you go back to kind of so many of the original kind of Victorian ghost stories, they were, told around sort of fireplaces, and it was like M.R. James and Charles Dickens inviting a few friends round for readings, and they would all share a ghost story that they'd written, and that's where the kind of Christmas tradition of the ghost story comes from. So it's really interesting sort of background to it. But yeah, I think and also has, I think, this kind of air of mystery that I think is really nice. I think it maybe appeals a bit more to fans of mysteries, because there's always this question of what's the ghost doing there, or kind of what does the ghost want? And there's a lot of stories where the ghost is trying to get something over or explain something. There's some kind of secret sort of buried in the past that sort of starts to comes to the fore. So I think, there's a lot going for ghost stories. I think they definitely have a broader appeal than sort of, I would say, horror in that sort of true sense of the word, if we can say that.
And I know it's not Halloween now, but what's your favorite sort of ghost story? Even like even obviously a synopsis of your favorite ghost story. Like even as a kid, what's the one that sort of kind of you still remember now?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd come back to the Signalman, which is not a terribly original choice. It's Charles Dickens' ghost story, and I had the pleasure of performing it a couple of times, which was absolutely so much fun to do, and really kind of get into my sort of like my dig out the kind of waistcoat and cane and stuff, and get into the whole sort of Victorian feel. But basically, yeah, in a nutshell, the Signalman is a story about an unnamed narrator who's on a walking holiday, and he discovers this sort of rail tunnel with a signalman who's kind of sat by the tunnel, and he goes to talk to this chap, just kind of saying hello, passing the time of day. Sort of gets this vibe something's not quite right the first time he's there, so he goes back the following night, and the signalman tells him this story of the ghosts he's seen outside the tunnel, and the signalman is persuaded that the ghosts are trying to communicate something. And his sort of final thing he says that second night is, I've seen another ghost, and I don't know what it's trying to tell me. And there's a lovely touch when it goes back the third night, which shall I spoil it?
Yeah.
Should I stop there?
Right. Spoiler alert.
It's been out for like 150 years. So
you haven't read it by now.
Basically, yes. And he goes back the third night, and the signalman's found he's dead. Basically, he's found dead by the rail tracks. And basically, this kind of what the last ghost has done has kind of led the signalman to kind of run out onto the line. So it's got this sort of great sort of through thread, a really great atmosphere, lovely build. I think that's one of the things I love about ghost stories, that sort of slow build and this kind of creeping tension just goes up bit by bit. And one of the things that ghost stories can do that's really interesting, and I think, again, talk about a difference to horror. So many horror films, you sort of, if you get a sense of like, I haven't seen the monster that's chasing me, then I feel a bit let down. But a lot of ghost stories don't really show a ghost. Like, there's no ghost shown in the signalman. There's just this kind of intimation that these ghosts are real. Basically, kind of the narrator's experience tells us that the ghosts are real. But it's not like there's a big kind of jump scare where the thing pops out and sort of, just kind of person jumps out of their sort of Victorian hat. It is such a different sort of a different way of storytelling. And say in many a tale, the ghost is implied, if rather than being seen, which again is quite a big difference. But yeah, the Signal one would be an absolute favorite. If you look for something more modern, I've really loved all of Laura Purcell's books. I think she's an author I'd really recommend. She came along to the Ghost Story Festival 2019, 2 years ago now. But I kind of couldn't even almost pick between her books. Bone China and The Corset, I think, were particularly great, but all four of her books are well worth looking if you're after a bit more of a modern author working in the field. Yeah.
What about
why ghost stories kind of set around winter? Why do you always kind of associate winter with ghost stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is sort of, I suppose, is sort of mood and atmosphere, and sort of it's quite hard to, it was a lovely summer's evening, when the ghost appeared. It's quite hard to sort of get that over to some extent. I think the Christmas connection does absolutely come from your Dickens and your M.R. James, and that sort of tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas kind of started to catch around that time. And then we started to see Christmas anthologies and sort of Christmas collections of ghost stories. So there is that kind of Christmas connection. I suppose there's also a bit of a Halloween connection, end of October, and we're sort of starting to tell spooky tales around the fire. So I think that whole sort of window from October to December to me is kind of totally open game for ghost stories as far as I'm concerned. I think that's where that's really started to come from. Any Christmas Carol, you could probably argue, is one of the most famous ghost stories ever. It probably is the most famous ghost story ever. And that connection with Christmas and winter is absolutely inseparable. So that's what it's. I think that's why it hangs there. It's sort of going out into the dark, crisp night and sort of looking over your shoulder slightly as you walk home after your ghost story performance. I think that's a big part of it.
You know what? I it's a bit of a silly ghost story. It's not even a ghost story. It's technically a monster story, I guess. But it's always one that I remember as a child. Because my granny used to have this, and it is I can visualize it now, and I can't remember the name. It was like a collection of sort of ghost stories, but I remember we were at her house on Halloween, and we got this book out because we wanted to scare ourselves and stuff, and it's called Taily-Po, and it's basically have you heard of it before?
I haven't. No.
Right, so basically, It's a bit silly, but it's kind of as a child, it's quite scary. So basically, what you have is it's like North American folklore and stuff. But basically, you have a hunter, or it's like a hermit or something, and he is in the woods in a cabin, and he's hunting game, and he comes across something, and he basically chops its tail off. And he uses the tail sort of to feed him and his 3 dogs. And then that night, he wakes up and he sees these sort of black eyes and this sort of kind of toothy grin at the foot of his bed, and it goes, Taily-Po, Taily-Po, I want my Taily-Po back. And he calls his dogs, and the dogs chase it off into the woods. 2 of them come back, 1 of them doesn't, and then it comes back again, says Taily-Po, Taily-Po, I want my Taily-Po back, and this goes on, and then sort of to the point where you know, you don't hear anything about what happened to the woodsman and stuff, and then it's sort of like some travelers stumble across a destroyed cabin with this beast within it and stuff, and it was just like, as a child, it was just like, just sort of, you know, and it wasn't the whole thing. I just remember is Tailipo, I want my Tailipo back, and it's like, as a child, just like, oh my god, that's so freaky.
Yeah, totally. I think kind of it was. I mean, I think two things I pick up on. I mean, firstly, when you, I mean, it's something even when you say the term ghost story, no one has to really think what you mean, because everyone has those stories, those little anecdotes, like you're all sort of, you know, you're all in a tent around the campfire, or someone's. I mean, I used to tell my little cousin's ghost stories. I was about the oldest cousin of 4 on that side of the family, and they just kind of, everyone, tell us a ghost story, and kind of, it was just, that was the thing that I did kind of as a sort of teenager and slightly before being a teenager. So everyone has that kind of universal experience of some way. I've heard a ghost story somewhere, or someone in the family has like a true ghost story or some experience they've had. But kind of, that's a story that sounds a bit more sort of like folk horror, and that's kind of that's quite an interesting area in itself, because it's kind of the sort of the close cousin of the ghost story, as I sort of see it. It has that same atmosphere, but like I say, rather than being a ghost, it's more likely to be a monster, or have that kind of like mythology or folklore kind of inspiration. I think, again, that's another area that's undergoing quite interesting kind of revival right now. There's a very big box set of films coming out from, I knew I'd forget the minute I said it, somebody is bringing out a very big set of folk horror films, about 20 films in the box, kind of from all over the world. Days Enchanted, and you know, I might have to look it up, or someone could look it up for me. But it's definitely something that's kind of really having a, like, you think of things like The Ritual that was on Netflix. You know, that was a really good example of that sort of folk horror sort of feel. Midsummer would definitely fit in that sort of folk horror bracket. So, you know, that's another area, and I do think those two things run so parallel. You know, I think they run so next to each other.
Have you ever?
Sorry, I'm going to look it up.
Have you ever? No, it's a play as well as a film, but it's called Ghost Stories. The film has got Paul Whitehouse. What's I can't remember. Played Bilbo Baggins. He was in The Office. Martin Freeman. Yeah, Martin Freeman. Yeah. He's in it as well. And I honestly, like, my ex, when we went to see it, like, she didn't rate it. I loved it so much, to the point where I wrote a very, very, very long article breaking down and analysing it stuff, because it's done by a million names. He's one of Nyman. Yes, that's it, from League of Gentlemen, and he also does the stage shows for Darren Brown. And I loved it so much, because not only the 3 stories within it, and if you've never seen it, or if you've never seen it, just, you know, get it, because it's freaky as hell as well. It's like old school ghost stories as well. So it's basically, he goes and he talks to 3 people about their sort of kind of experience, and he's basically this cynic, not cynic, what's the word? Skeptic. Yeah, skeptic. He's a skeptic, yeah. And sort of along the lines of sort of like, you know, a Darren Brown or something like that. He sort of goes there to basically challenge it and sort of kind of thing. Now, it's got an amazing twist at the end, which you will either love or hate, but the whole thing sort of kind of ties in with it all. There's stuff throughout which you pick up on and you don't realize, and then at the end it ties it all together. But the 3 stories themselves on their own, if you just want sort of good, like, ghost stories, are so good. They're so good, and it's just so freaky and sort of atmospheric, and, you know, even the stuff that just happened to him, very, very good. And I love it. I think it's like, when it comes to sort of kind of ghost story films that have been on, I rate it so highly, just because it's got so much sort of going on. And it's like, again, people don't, you know, my ex hated the ending, because she's like, well, that's stupid. And I was just like, it's not though. Oh my god, it's like the most genius thing ever, because it ties everything together, and because you understand where he comes from as a, you know, a stage show producer, and as a writer and stuff like that, where it's all come from as well. But it's like, wow, it was so good. It
was really well done. It was a real hark back to those kind of days of anthology horror, which I don't think we sort of tend to get so much these days. But you go back to kind of Hammer and Amicus, that was so common for those kind of little 3-part sort of 3 individual stories, or you know. And I think that, to me, I always feel it's a bit sad that tradition is kind of not only died out. We have less. I suppose we have things like VHS, and there's been a few good ones over the years. I would argue. ABC's of horror, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And things like Little Deaths was a British one that I really liked. But yeah, there's not as many around as there used to be, and I think it's a great way to tell a story, which I think is it fits the ghost story perfectly. It really does, because they are. I think it's in a way it's harder to do, I suppose, what you would call a pure ghost story in a longer form. You think of like a lot of longer, if it's like a single film as a ghost story, it always has that like mystery element. It's not just about haunting, because it's not kind of enough to sustain like a full story. So you have to try and unravel the reason behind the haunting or why the haunting's happening. So there is that kind of added element where, so those 3 short stories, you can just concentrate on the ghost and what kind of the scary element, I suppose, for want of a better word for it, rather than that mystery element.
I think that, I was going to say, I think with a lot of ghost stories, I think it's the idea of trying to keep it fresh, trying to keep a different perspective what people can get onto. And one of the biggest examples has been especially in like the last couple of decades, has been like the found footage aspect, which, Blair Witch Project, I remember being taken into the cinema. I really shouldn't have been, because I was only 9 years old when I saw the film. But you know what? It was one of them things that, watching it was bloody amazing. And it was,
I think it's
and
underrated.
it was like, it really is. And then years later, you got something like Paranormal Activity, which
once you get dragged out of the bed,
that is quite rough when you see that bit. When you see like just literally like being direct, like all the scrapings. But it's films like that. I think because it adds that touch of realism, because it's supposed found footage. It's made people think, someone's just left their camera on record and whatever. And then because you watch it, because it's got that slow build up, because even in Paranormal Activity, it's about a good 40 minutes into that film before anything really starts happening. It's just so much setup. And because you sort of get comfortable on that level, you're taking in them characters, you're taking in the environment, you're getting the history, and then all of a sudden you start seeing little bits of movement, and then when you just all of a sudden just see, like when she gets pulled out of bed, or when she's just like staring over, or when you just see the other guy just getting thrown at the camera, that because it's been earned. And then I watched it again a second time a few years ago, and I don't know, I think it was because watching that first time, the impact was there. Yeah. Seeing it the second time, you're like,
yeah, you kind of know what's coming, though. See, that's it. It's the same with the Blair Witch Project, though. It's like, watching that for the first time, and I remember seeing it in the cinema with my ex for many, like, I would have been about, 16 or 17, I think, when it was out, like, long time ago. And I remember watching it and fucking having to drive home, and I live... Like, and I've said this a million, I think I've told this story before, but I live in a village in the middle of nowhere in Northern Ireland, and there's when you go to where I live, they have this old, what used to be like, I think like a courthouse, and they used to hang people from it. And it's literally, it's an old barn now, so it's all run down, and it's scary as it is. My mum's car got a flat outside that thing on the day just seeing the Blair Witch Project. I have never changed a tire so fast in my entire life. It was freaking.
I can just imagine you've looked out the window, you could just see like an old noose slowly swaying.
I was just like, oh man. Oh, freaking as hell.
I find most stories, especially films, start out as ghost stories and then become something else. I mean, I'm thinking of like Sleepy Hollow. It starts out very much as a ghost story, then becomes like almost an action film at the end. And I mean, like, even Alien, it's a ghost story in space, basically. But then there's that typical Hollywood climax.
It's that thing, isn't it? Once you outreach the part which is the ghost story, they still have film to finish. Yeah. And so they have to change gear because suddenly the ghost story doesn't work once too much is out in the open.
See, that's
I've often wondered. And again, I've not everyone agrees with me on this. I do think sometimes the like horror filmmaker, and probably more studios than anything, to be honest, than directors, are sort of very like safe, and they kind of want to do that thing of like, I need to kind of make the audience jump out of their chair and spill the popcorn kind of thing. And so I mean, I think we are starting to get away from that a bit. I think we're seeing a lot more sort of Hollywood produced horror films that are a bit more intelligent and a bit more sort of patient, but I do think there is just a tendency to kind of, and I could reel off a few. I mean, one of my most frustrating films I ever saw was Sinister. I know a lot of people love Sinister, but I was kind of half hour in, I was like, this is great, this is such a good build, and then just sort of, I said, just turns into, suddenly we just turn into another.
Is that
jump
the one with
scary horror?
Is that the hanging tree one? Is that the one that's got the like?
Absolutely.
I was told, I went at last Halloween. My friends said, "Let's go round and we'll watch the scariest movie on Netflix." And I said, "What's it called?" Oh, Sinister. I was like, "All right, okay, cool." And you know, the only thing scary about it was my ex-girlfriend was screaming throughout the entire thing. But it was just like it isn't that scary. It isn't.
I think it starts well. I think it starts. That first half hour, I think I was on board, but I think it really went off the rails quick. And I think it is just stick with it. Have the confidence. Say the audience will sit and watch it. If it's a good ghost story, the audience will sit and watch it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of. I think the best ones you have, you know, and I think Paranormal Activity was good because you didn't really see anything. You know, there was lots of sort of kind of, you know, there was a lot of inference to things, and obviously, yeah, fine, there was stuff that happened. You never saw the demon. Blair Witch Project was very much all in your mind. It was literally them sort of kind of, you know, tents rattling and them seeing things and shit happening in sort of the peripheral and in the background and stuff, and that works. You know, the Babadook. Have you ever seen the film The Babadook?
Yeah.
Babadook is the same thing, you know. It's, you know, very sort of kind of psychological, and you know, and I think that works because you who can scare you better than yourself, basically.
Yeah.
So why, you know, so having something there that is the monster or the ghost and stuff sort of takes you out of your own mind and gives you reality. Whereas if you keep it in your own mind, it's anything, and it's
something that Stephen King talks about. He says kind of, it talks about keeping it behind the door. I think it's in Danse Macabre. And he says the trouble is, for a horror writer, is what the reader is imagining behind that door is worse than anything you could put behind the door. But as a writer, you can't create something as scary as what the audience is picturing. So the trouble is, sometimes you sort of like the reader opens the door and there's a guy in a kind of a Scooby-Doo costume. And you think that was crap. Well, I was really nervous prior to that. I mean, I think personally, I'll pick up to think. Like, I think the best ghost stories on film of late have been the Japanese J-horror movies. Think of things like Ring and Grudge and Dark Water. They are petrified. They are terrifying. They are genuinely like, the Ring has every facet of a ghost story. It was mismarketed for me. It was marketed as a horror film, of course, but it's everything about the pace of it and the feel of it and the build. It's a ghost story through, and you only have that reveal at the end. You know that, and that's one of the things of a ghost story is you don't throw the monster in at halfway or the ghost in at halfway. That comes right at the end. All the build comes up to that. So I think also
it sticks to you, doesn't it? The Ring.
Gotcha.
I think I've told this story to some of the guys before, but when it first came out, I was staying over at a friend's place, and they have an older daughter. She was about 18 at the time.
Yeah.
And as we got to the end, that last scene where they got the TV, me and her stepdad caught each other's eyes. And we slipped our mobile phones out of our pockets. And he phoned her mobile phone, and I phoned the landline at the same time. And we had to peel her off the ceiling. We actually had to peel her off the ceiling. She beat the crap out of us both for about 10 minutes.
Justifiably.
I think that's one of the areas that is probably a little bit. Actually, well, talk exploring it, the Ghost Story Festival. The thing I like ghosts and technology is not kind of, because I think that's one of the things that's more difficult, and probably why a lot of ghost stories, even though written now, are kind of harking back to years past, is we're sort of in an age where there was less skepticism, I suppose. There was less there was sort of more belief, even if your lead characters didn't always believe. Very often the lead characters are skeptics, but there's always like someone around them going, well,
we've rationalized more of the world, haven't we?
Yeah, precisely that. And I think, I read very recently Jason Arnold's Ghoster, which I think is, to me, is one of the best takes on like the technology in horror. and I thought it was really, really clever. And I think sort of that Ring does that. Ring does that with the phone, and then with the kind of the video camera thing as well. I think it does some of that, and I think that's probably the area that is still somewhat untapped. So there are a few, but not enough to make me think that's run out yet, for my money. Some have been quite bad, sadly, which is a bit of a problem. But there's a handful of a smattering of good ones. But I thought Host was interesting. I mean, again, kind of as another way to make a film, and I think we'll probably see more of those kind of, sort of Skype-made films or whatever they, Zoom films, or people are sort of exploring alternative ways of storytelling, and like I say, don't try and add that realism like Blair Witch did, like Paranormal Activity did. But I wonder if we're getting a bit burnt out on found footage. I mean, if you go surfing for horror films, just an endless stream of films. Absolutely,
but it's now the found footage films are not just particularly for horror. You can find them there for other dramas, even for comedy as well. Because there was it was called Project X. I remember watching it, and it was semi-based on apparently some kind of true story about a kid who hosted this massive party. I know we're going off the horror side of it, but I used to really enjoy this. But he basically put a thing up on Facebook to say, I'm inviting a few friends over. What should have been about 20 people ended up being about 2,000, and the neighbourhood was practically destroyed. And then next day he's being interviewed, and he's got sunglasses on, he's got shorts, he's got his hair slicked back. He's going, I'll tell you what, it was a great party. I'm going to do it all over again. And it was incredible. But if you watch the film, it's actually really good, and it's shot really well. It does go a bit crazy towards the end, and it's a bit, I don't know, it just goes a bit balls out compared to like what the rest of it was. But found footage is, I think it's really good, but it is being overplayed. You have to find ways to keep it fresh. And one of the ones that I really enjoyed, must be about nearly 10 years old as well now, Chronicle, which was the superhero one.
Yeah.
Which
that was quite good, actually.
I thought it was brilliant, and when you see the actors that came from it, you had Michael B. Jordan, who is now like one of the biggest names in Hollywood, Dane DeHaan, who went on to be Green Goblin in the Spider-Man film that doesn't exist anymore, and other things. But he was fantastic in that. I thought he was really good, really creepy character. The found footage bit went a little bit weird, because it's like, when you see him, like he's just sitting in a junkyard, it's like, why would you just film yourself sitting in a junkyard? Or, it's a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next evolution is what we're seeing with the film Hardcore Henry, where basically it's shot purely from first person.
Yeah.
And I've watched some of that.
Like that.
And basically, it's like watching someone on playing a first person shooter. I mean, you can tell a story in that way, but it gives you a lot of motion sickness.
I think they're going back to the sort of like, you've got a lot of the horror stuff, especially in Netflix. You've got the Haunting on Hill House, the first one, which is all right, the second one, which is pants. But they're kind of going back to this sort of kind of old school, sort of kind of Victorian era of ghost storytelling, I think. I think that's sort of, they're trying to find, because there's only a finite amount of ways you can sort of tell a ghost story or sort of visualize a ghost story, and I think they're trying to sort of go back and find this sort of kind of old school way to do things. Because the whole found footage thing is, everybody's done it now. It's just sort of, it's like you said, it's proliferated.
I think it's sorry.
No. There's so much of it, and I think they need to find something different, and I think that's the angle they're going. That's the direction they're probably going.
I think it's about sort of finding something that sort of explaining why it's found footage, kind of making that really inherent to the story. I think sometimes you sort of see a horror film and think, well, that just feels like it was found footage because you couldn't afford the proper kit, sort of thing. If you see what I mean? I'm not really horror, but I get that. It's like, if you're on a low budget and you think, oh, how can we make a horror film? Like, I salute you for having the innovation to go and do the thing on found footage. But I could think of a few sort of things like Skew was a really good found footage horror film that I loved. And basically what happened in that was the camera was basically picking up ghosts, but it wouldn't pick them up when you played it back. So someone would be like, oh my God, they're freaking out because they've seen this thing on the camera, and they go back and there's nothing there. And just that there was a reason for the camera. The camera was kind of part of telling, it is part of telling the story, which I thought was really quite a good one. Or sort of I've rewatched recently. It's not a ghost story at all. Quite a I've forgotten how grim this horror film was actually. The Poughkeepsie tapes. I don't know if I've seen this one, but it's it's like a mockumentary, but it's got these found footage bits in it. And that was just like, and basically the idea was this was like the serial killer's kind of record of his crimes. Yeah. It did not get any more pleasant since I first watched it, to be honest. But it was a sign it worked. It was a sign I was like, I'm quite uncomfortable here. And sort of like, it's a sign it's doing what it's meant to be doing, and doing what it's doing well. So I think it can still be done well, but I do think it's just there needs to be more thought as like, why is it found footage apart from?
Have there been any films which you just couldn't watch? Like it's like, no, I can't, like, given especially what you watch through cinema. Yes. Have there been any films where you go, nope, I'm out?
There was only ever one, and I wrote not a review of this. So I normally do a weekly review for a series called Film Gutter, which is kind of extreme horror and kind of like really fringe out there, kind of cult, weirder the better sort of. And it's taken a lot of very kind of challenging films, I would say, in a word. I sometimes watch something, I think, I don't know why I did that to myself, but I keep doing it to myself for some reason. It was a Russian film called Green Elephant, which is basically about two guys who are in a prison cell accused of a crime they're not quite sure of. And basically they sort of start reasonably friendly and then everything kind of goes to hell shortly after. And there was a scene in that I was like, no, that's the one. That was about 4 years into weekly reviews. So it was not something to take lightly. But a few I've watched through my fingers here and there. A few I've been like, that's sort of pretty unpleasant. But it takes a lot to break me. But that was the one that I may try again at some point. But there's a lot. I mean, I think the thing is, again, the question for me is like I say with the found footage, like, why do it? I'm not sort of a gorehound for the sake of being a gorehound. I'm not sort of like into just a load of gratuity for nothing. I want to know. I want you to tell me a story and make me care about a character and do something interesting. And sort of, if you're going to do something that is really confronting and unpleasant, I want to justify it. To feel like, that was there for a reason. I think not every film does that, in fairness, in the extreme horror world, but the ones that do are the ones that stick with you. The ones that do are the ones that you sort of that you remember and that really sort of leave the lasting impression. But that's the one that got me.
I was never a fan of the Saw fans simply because I find them quite sort of graphic, and thing is, I don't mind horror films. It's ones where it's just gore and I'm a bit squeamish, so I'm just like I don't know if I can watch this. It's just
I would defend Saw, I really, because I think I watched about the first 2 or 3 years and years back, and a friend of mine said we watched a lot, and I was like, well, kind of 3 wasn't that brilliant. He said, watch the lot, just watch the lot and come back to me. So I sat and watched Saw 1 to 7 I haven't watched the new ones just yet, but watched 1 to 7. And I went back to it and I said, that was surprisingly clever, because what Saw does that I don't think I've ever seen another series do is it's still doing things in 6 and 7 that make you feel differently about the earlier films and sort of reflect them. Like, it's all the same editor throughout the whole 7 films. So there is this like arc that, like, and you think of like most horror series that go past about 2 or 3. I mean, look at like Hellraiser, look at like Friday. They're all over the shop. Like, what the hell is going on? You're in Romania 1 minute, you're over here the next. Like different characters. Like
Hellraiser in space.
Yeah, exactly. That's his face. Yeah, so I'm sure Saw will end up there eventually. But it really did tell a story, and kind of as some characters came in and some came out, and this kind of legacy got continued. I thought it was really. Surprised me, and they did decline, but there's the fact I felt there was a whole journey there that I've been on through 7 films, which was not something I've encountered before.
I think with the Saw films, what I always used to quite enjoy was that I like that there was the narrative, and even watching if you go to like the what was originally the last one, which was Saw 3D, which I've got a good bit of a story about that one. I'll say a sec. But when it got to that point, when you can see when there's, like you say, they're still taking a bit, say, from the first movie. There's a bit from Saw 3, Saw 4. You've still got all these links. It's like, it was nice as well to think if you had been following for all 7 movies, you kind of had that payoff, because you're like, you know, you haven't just wasted your time. You have actually got a story out of it. You've actually got a conclusion to not just Jigsaw, but to most of the characters that you've seen. And I always appreciated them, and I could see how a lot of people read it and like them. But I remember going to see the last. Well, I keep saying it's the last Saw film. There's been 2 since then. Saw 7. Yeah, let's say Saw 7. I went with a friend of mine who is an absolute horror nut, and she said to me, "We've got to go and see Saw 3D when it comes out. We've got to go and see it on the day." So we booked it. All good, all fine. And I'll take it. Have you all seen what was Saw 3D? Saw the last chapter? Whatever you want to call it.
I've not seen them, so don't worry. I'm just not a gore guy. Too gore.
Okay, so the first scene in that movie ties back to the first Saw. So you've got Dr. Gordon, literally just after he's cut his foot off, he is dragging himself down the corridor, bleeding out, and he takes his stumped leg and puts it against a hot pipe to cauterize it. Now, literally, that is the first scene in this movie. My friend took her 3D glasses off. She got up. She went, "I can't watch any more of this. I'm going." And do you know what? She walked straight out. And I was just about to go. She went, no, I'm going to get a taxi. You've watched the rest of the movie. Wow. So, no, I said, you can't just go. She went, no. Look, honestly, I just can't sit through it anymore. And I remember watching it. And then the next scene, you've got the 2 guys that are tied to each other, and you've got the woman above them with the saw. And then you've got Chester from Linkin Park. When he's got his back super. Now that bit when you see him like literally pulling himself out of that chair with the super glue stuck to his back, I thought that was horrible to watch. That was really.
That makes me feel nauseous thinking about it.
but do you know what? Though, because of like all the latex, all the makeup, everything was so good because it replicated his tattoos perfectly. And as you see him tear as he's pulling himself off of that seat. It's horrible to watch, but at the same time, you go, I'll tell you what, that makeup artist definitely deserves an Oscar. That is some good stuff there. But then, I watch this thinking, like, since that first bit, this film is getting more and more gross. It's just getting more gory by the second.
The thing I loved about 7, that no one seems to think about, the thing I loved about 7 is the fact that the lead character in it is, he claims to be a survivor of Jigsaw. But he's faking it.
Oh, yes.
So he's written this like best-selling memoir of like how he survived Jigsaw. It's like on the books on the talk show circuit, and it's all just bullshit. It's absolutely just a great idea. So you built up this mythology over 6 films. Yeah,
that's Saw 6, the one with the fake one.
Is that 6? I thought it was 7. No, sure. I thought it was 7 because that's where it goes to the survivors group.
So I'm assuming Jigsaw gets him in the end for faking a story.
Oh no! Oh, I'm getting it confused.
I'm sure it's 7. I'm sure, but I swear, like, I might be wrong.
Do not contradict the horror expert.
That's where we get the reappearance of Dr. Gordon.
What happens in number? What's it happens in number 6 then? Because that's confusing me. Because I know number 6 they have I know number 6 you had the you had the 2 detectives that had survived. You had the one who she faked her death after the other guy that had put a pen into his throat had died. And, oh God. Yeah,
6 can't remember as well. 6 can't remember that as well.
But
4's my favourite. 4's my favourite a lot. I think 4 has the cleverest twist a lot. I think 4 has one of the cleverest twists in movie history. I'll stand by that.
Spoiler
why is that?
Go on then. If any,
they all have twists. It's not a spoiler to go. A Saw film has a twist. Every Saw film has a twist.
Yeah.
That's a part of what Saw is.
It is the twist itself, which is really good. Which as if you watch Saw 3. And you watch Saw 4, they literally are parallel to each other.
And then explain. I'm never going to watch them, so you might as well explain.
Don't spoil it. No, but basically, you as you say, Jonjo, you realise 3 and 4 are happening at the same time, and it's so clever. It sort of sets you up to think it's afterwards in that very opening scene, and it's only at the end I went, Of course, they could run at the same time. It's not the same characters. It's not the same. It's like that could easily be running concurrent. It was only when you get to the end you realise there's a little moment where someone pops up from Saw 3 and you think, what? What are they doing there? And you say, oh yeah, it's all happening at once. So it's really, really good, really good.
But do you know what? I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I did like Saw 5. I really did like Saw 5 because obviously you got that one detective who, at the end of Saw 4, he's left to die by I can't remember the character's name, but I remember it's Costas Mandylor, who is a fantastic actor.
Hoffman, isn't he?
Hoffman, that's it, yeah. But I remember he leaves him to die. He basically puts like this fishbowl on his head. He's like filling up water. And this is where, he puts the pen into his throat so he can breathe. Yeah. And then the whole film is basically him then trying to track down Hoffman, trying to stop the rest of the traps. And then that ending, I'll tell you what, because you knew he wasn't going to survive. That was obvious. And it's just where he literally is crushed to death. He's given the choice. He goes, right, go into this glass coffin. If you go in here, you'll survive. It's like, that sounds like bullshit. But but then Hoffman gets thrown into the casket himself, goes down. He goes into like this safe room. And then, the ceiling just starts collapsing down. It's one of them things. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, but, I think my one, something you were saying a bit earlier, man. My one complaint about the Saw films is that term of torture porn that came around when that and Hostel as well. And I sort of think I really hate that term because I think it is sort of. Well, I think kind of if you use the word porn, that implies to me that like you're using the torture to titillate the audience. That to me is like porn. You use the word porn, it's there to kind of arouse you, but it kind of as the concept. And I think sort of. Like Saw's more than that, I'm not going to say I can't sort of. There's probably certain films I couldn't defend and go that probably is just torture porn, fair enough. But I don't think Saw is that. You're talking about 7 film arc with ones. I think Hostel. I might let you have it if you know what I mean. If someone was to make that implication, which was the other one that got tarred with a particular brush, but. I think, I say not everything. I think it just what started to happen, a bit like the video nasties. It's like every film that had any of that sort of stuff in it was like, oh, that's torture porn. It's like, well, no, it could still be a clever, interesting film. Just if it being graphic doesn't mean it can't be clever or interesting or, doing something different. I think sort of it got a bit lazy with the kind of labeling of that sort of torture porn. Let's say with the video nasties, every kind of horror film that had a bit of, death and blood was like, it's a video nasty. I'd say, you can't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, the first Saw was very clever in its writing, I thought. Some really neat twists in it. And for what was a fairly minimal budget, as I understand.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
$1.1 million was the first Saw movie, and most of that was only given because they got Danny Glover on the cast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cary Elwes was on a percentage deal. Took upfront payment. He just took. Maybe he made the right decision. Took a cut of the box office. Like great.
Cary Elwes, he had a massive dispute with them because he was supposed to have returned earlier in the series, but I think because of something to do with the royalties he was supposed to have got, and he went, "No, I ain't gonna do it. I ain't gonna take part in this." And then when they were doing Saw the Final Chapter, they then said to him, look, it's different guys that are behind the financing now. We've got different people that are working on this side. Basically, everyone that you collaborated with before, they're out. Will you take part again if we give you shitload of money? And he went, yeah, of course I will. Yeah, why not?
Fuck yeah. Give me boatloads of money.
Precisely.
Because he hadn't been in lots. Because that's, to be honest, like I really liked him as an actor. Because he was in Glory, which is one of my favorite films. Obviously, Princess Bride.
Oh yeah.
But then he started kind of
Purge.
He wasn't really in lots. And then that was the first film I saw him in. Like I watched Saw 1. And when he started cutting off his leg, I was just like, I was eating some chicken at the time, and I was like, I can't deal with this, man. I don't know if I can watch this. But yeah, it's the first film I'd seen him in a long time, and I was just like, wow. And now he's cutting off his leg. I'm trying to think. He's in Stranger Things. He's in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
I just had to look him up because I was like, I'm sure there was something more recent as well.
Yeah, he's in Stranger Things.
I think what you're finding out is quite a lot of good actors are doing horror like more and more. It seems to be sort of quite a common thread now.
I think it's kind of like how Marvel done it, because a lot of people would never normally do a superhero movie because they went, it's going to ruin my career. And now if you look at like the average Marvel movie, if you haven't got at least 2 Oscar winners, it's like, is it worth watching?
Absolutely.
The horror as well. You look at look at like a lot of the big horror movies that have been coming out of late. You've always got at least 1 or 2 massive headliner names for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Funny, the person there was a conversation about the other week was Elijah Wood, and kind of he's like, obviously he's sort of probably best known for Lord of the Rings as much as anything. But you look at his filmography now, he's either producing or starring in fairly bonkers independent horror. I mean, he was producer on like The Greasy Strangler. He was producer on. He was in Maniac about 10 years ago now. Come to Daddy, he was in the other year. It's just sort of seems to be doing what he's having fun doing. Basically, it just seems kind of that's what he's into, and just does it.
I don't know how much you check on the podcast side, but a few years ago he was on one of my favourite ones, the No Sleep podcast. Where I think he co-produced it as well as starring in it, and that was actually quite good. That was quite good to see him in like a different zone to where you normally see.
He's a total horror nerd. Like he really is. It's amazing. But,
but like Danny Radcliffe's done exactly the same thing. He's done the 8 Harry Potter films, and now he's done like some just really bonkersly, really obscure film because he can. He has that,
what's the one where he's got guns nailed to his hands?
Guns akimbo.
And then there's also the one where he's a farting zombie. Well, a farting corpse even.
Yeah.
That was quite good. That was quite cool.
I wish more actors would do that. Do you know what I mean? I think like you've made that much money off Harry Potter. Like why? I'll just pick what the hell I want. I don't have to plough a certain furrow. I just can just sort of do what I feel like doing. And I think he's another one that makes interesting sort of choices. I think it fascinates me the way that actors kind of shape up their careers, sort of what do I want to be known as, and what do I want to be seen as? And he obviously does not want to be seen as the kid from Harry Potter for all eternity.
I think someone who is definitely, I was just going to say, someone who I think has made some very good choices in terms of acting, in terms of very different roles, is, especially since he left Doctor Who, David Tennant. If you look at his like IMDb, especially from like the last few years, he's done so much different voice acting work, whether it's for adult stuff or even played Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales.
He's in Final Space as well. He's the
Final Space.
Yes, Lord Commander in Final Space, and and also Jessica Jones.
Oh yeah, awesome bad guy. Awesome bad guy.
The actor Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart. He was in the Green Room.
Yeah, the film about
he played like a leader of neo-Nazis.
Yeah, it's really dark.
It's complete opposite of Captain of a Starfleet. But then again,
I think it must be. You wonder sort of how maybe the agent kind of gets these things and goes, "Well, I'll send it him, but I don't really want him to do it." Go, I really want to do this, and the agent's like, "Oh God, do you have to?" And you wonder what these conversations are like.
There's a skit
really
on Nicolas Cage's agent going on about films and stuff, and him just taking everything, just like
I think Nicolas Cage just likes working. I can't even disrespect it because I think he does so many films. And every now and then there's a really good one. Every now and then but sort of for every good one, there's probably 4 or 5 that are absolutely tough. But if he's enjoying himself, I don't think he really needs the money at this point, surely. I sort of just think he likes to be busy and likes to be sort of out there doing stuff, if that's your bag, then why not,
See, I have respect for them. There's a band who we used to play with back in Belfast called the Dangerfields, and my mate was sent me a link, and they're still going. Like, technically my band's still going, but they're going and have been gigging constantly forever, and they're still going. And it's just the fact that they would play anywhere at any time, and they didn't care. They would literally play to one person in a dive bar, somewhere like, where you're like, there's no way I'm doing that. And they would just literally, they didn't care. And it's just like, I kind of have respect for people who do stuff like that. Fine, it might not be great. maybe, you know, they're not the best band in the world, or maybe he's not the best actor in the world or whatever, but, you know, you've got respect that they don't care. They're just going to do their thing. That's what they want to do. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, cool.
That's Nicolas Cage. He'll be in a film till the very end. He'll be 80, 90, still be out doing this thing, bet your bottom dollar.
What's he's got that Netflix thing, or is it The History of Swearing, or the history
Well, I mentioned...
That's so good.
It's good fun.
No, I mentioned Patrick Stewart, which means I mentioned The Next Generation, which means I have to mention Babylon 5 is making a comeback.
Yes, of course.
With J. Michael Straczynski. And I'm like, okay, after decades of Straczynski saying, nope, it's not coming back, it's in the hands of these studios, they're not interested, suddenly it's coming back on CW,
which is a bit of a concern, but and this is
GMS,
quite a big but. Maybe CW are going to cancel every other show, and then they can just say, "Yep, here's your budget, done."
They've got a little bit less. They're not quite so teeny bop as people still think they are. They've handled a few things quite well. The newer Superman series is not quite so fluffy as people feared they were going to be.
Black Lightning was actually quite good on CW as well. But then again, I used to love, and I remember watching it on videotapes years ago, the ITV series, The Tomorrow People. When CW said they were going to do their own version of that, I really shouldn't have done, but I went, yeah, let's give this a watch. I'm sure it can't be that bad. I hated it. And Joe, what though? It's one of the things where I almost think I actually kind of hate the original series now because I made myself watch this shit.
I can't blame the original series.
No, I have high hopes for Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Because JMS is at the helm, and he said, like, no, I am approaching this from the ground up reboot. I'm not telling the same, so I'm taking the same premise and seeing where it goes this time. After 30 years of experience script writing,
it's interesting. I mean, I say with Paris Cinema Weekend, I was having an interview with Stephen Falk, who's a scriptwriter from Ghostwatch and The Awakening, and Gothic, which was the film we were screening that night. And he was saying, like, the thing with script writing and sort of in TV shows and there's like nothing's ever like dead. He was like, I got a phone call 2 days ago about a script I wrote 30 years ago. I don't know where that's come from. All of a sudden, this thing's been sat there in a box for absolutely ages, might have a life again. And that seems to be that nothing's ever sort of completely dead in the water. And it's honestly, it could be the case that someone's been trying to get this going for ages, and they've just hit sort of roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and someone goes, there's no money for this, and there's no demand, and this network's turned it down, that network's turned it down, and things just... sort of things really take time to happen, especially in TV and film. I mean, absolutely ridiculous amount of time to happen in some cases. But I'll be interested to see how it goes. I remember watching it as a teenager and enjoying it immensely. I've not revisited it for a number of years, so I'm probably going in. I'm sort of debating to myself now: do I rewatch it and like make the comparison, or do I just wait for it to come out and watch it without, as you were saying there, Jonjo, without the memory of the first one, or without a very clear memory?
Well, if you want to watch it, I've got the entire box set.
trying to get
all of it.
So I got the entire box set.
But
I've gone, Pete.
No, I was going to say, I've watched it recently, a few years ago. It holds up remarkably well from a script and writing perspective. The graphics, because this was the early iteration of CGI, it's a bit ropey at times, but the writing and the humor, and it spills water. And also, I think in some ways the cast was basically a lightning in a bottle. They really a good cast there. I mean, I could not imagine anyone else playing Garibaldi, the security officer. And or anyone else playing Lita Alexander. But I mean, from what I understand so far, it's going to be basically like a troubled Air Force officer with a mysterious past called Sheridan, and is leading, and that's it. That's all we know. But it seems to be kind of merging the Sheridan and Sinclair storylines into one, though. But
but
apparently
it's
actually gone online.
Expanse. If they do it right, it could be a new Expanse, and Expanse is the best sci-fi thing that's been on TV.
Absolutely.
For like forever. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've been begging to get an interview with the creators behind the Expanse because it is such a fantastic. I mean, I am an engineer. For like 15 years, I now write articles for the BBC looking at the technical feasibility of science fiction ideas. Like, will we ever pilot giant robots? Was one of mine. And I'm watching The Expanse and just loving all those little details, which shows, yes, this we could do this. I mean, like, the only big thing is their drives, where basically all this is, it works efficiently. They never explain how it works. It goes really fast, really good, and we don't burn much fuel. Yeah, that's what you want.
Yeah. See, I remember like you all talking about. I remember you got to watch Expanse because the thing is, I'd seen it on Sci-Fi, and it's like Sci-Fi. It's going to be another Sharknado. It's just going to be fucking pants, so I'm not going to bother with that. And then like literally, I got it. Thankfully, I got it sort of when it was on season 5, so I got to watch the entire thing sort of like through and stuff. And I was like, this is absolutely superb, absolutely outstanding. And it was those little things like I could like, it didn't sort of dawn on me. I was just like, why are those ships flying backwards? And then I realized it's because of the inertia that when they're going forward, that they would have kept them going. So they needed to turn around to sort of get the thrusters so that they would slow down. I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. And it's just like, the small things like that.
Yeah, the fourth season of the the fourth episode of the first season, CQB, is probably the most realistic space battle I've seen.
Oh yeah.
Because there's no shield, it's just bullets going really fast, and all you have is a very thick armor.
And inertia and things like that, dodging around things.
Shrapnel, debris, nukes, tornadoes, and then we firing missiles. Okay, fire back at the missiles and hope we shoot them.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
I feel like the thing is, everything eventually is going to get a reboot. It's got nothing surprises me anymore. There's no film or TV show or anything you go, I'm surprised to see that's going to reboot. Well, Quantum Leap reboot on the way, apparently.
Oh, no, I'm not sure about that.
I love Quantum Leap.
The final episode, he does make a comeback.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, there's a Hellraiser TV series. It just this is endless, you know.
I've got to also mention, and I don't know how to feel about this still, but Doctor Who is going to be having Russell T Davies return, which
it could have been GMS. It could not be GMS.
I say nothing bad against Davies because he has put together. He brought back Doctor Who. That's the way you got to look at it. We have got this show now because of what he done in 2005. He is a great writer. He has put together some fantastic storylines. He's made, he's the guy who brought on Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant as the Doctor. So, definitely got the great credentials there. You look at some of the stories he's written, the endings of the first 2 series, still 2 of the best finales I've ever seen. The New Year's specials that he done, which was his final episodes. Okay, they were quite cheesy, but they had a nice little send-off. But I don't know how I feel about him returning to the series because I feel that, even though he says, I've grown, my attitudes have changed, my abilities are different, I don't doubt that at all. And I'd love to see him write for Doctor Who again. But as a showrunner,
you want a new voice, don't you?
I really wanted someone new. I wanted someone who was going to be unexpected. And J. Michael Straczynski, I think, was going to be that perfect choice. I really thought this was going to be the guy that was going to take Doctor Who and just go, do you know what? Doctor Who has been a great show, but now it's time for a different stamp, a different culture, almost, if you will. Yeah, because, don't say it badly, but Doctor Who is a very British show. They've always kept it with British writers, British creators, but to have a different voice from a whole different background, I was in for that. I was really thinking, my God, this could be awesome. And then they just went, no, Russell T Davies said he'll come back, so we're going to bring him back.
I think it's one of those things where it could be great if he does get it, if he manages to get the same thing going on here originally, but he left for a reason. You know, he was kind of spun out on it, and I feel like he's been brought back more just to please all the complaining people.
Just what I was going to say.
Rather than to make
basically, he's doing
think he can make a
J.J.
positive
Abrams.
Rather than him making a positive contribution to the series, he's a backward-looking but safe pair of hands.
Correct course. Change that.
Pete, your camera's all fuzzy and stuff. By the way, man, it's you're going all blur. I'm not sure what that's like for everybody else, but it's sort of looking all sort of. Your cameras. Can you do me a favor? Can you just turn your camera off and on again? Just sort of.
I think it looks like a deliberate blur. You can set a blur setting.
No, it's like his face is like there's something weird going on. That's yeah, odd. Well,
your background's blurry, but I think
it's like it's all pixelated and stuff for me. So I've literally got this weird thing going on my screen.
Right. Matt, you need the better internet.
Yeah, everybody else is fine. It's just Pete. Everybody else is fine. It's just Pete.
I remember a few years ago, Bruce Campbell announced that he's going to. Is this on the 1st of April? He's going to finally the Doctor was coming to America, and he's going to be the new Doctor. And that was intended as pure April Fool's. But I thought, that would be great. That would be really good. Like, you can imagine him going, like, sauntering, going, Time Lords, bunch of bitchy little girls.
Hail to the king, baby.
That would have been good.
But I mean, you need someone with charisma to play the Doctor, someone who's got that kind of presence. And I think Bruce Campbell could have that just sheer insanity to do that. Will really pull it off.
Whatever. So Christopher Eccleston. I don't think I've seen him in much.
Now, he's done plenty. He does do a lot of shows still. He just he's one of these guys who I remember from an interview back in 2005. He said he never wanted to be typecast. He always wanted to make sure that whatever he went on to was because it interested him, and he didn't want to ever outstay his welcome.
He did about 3 or 4 seasons on the A Word, didn't he? And Sarah,
which is a really good show.
And he was brilliant in it.
Yeah.
And he had that childlike thing that he does, where in places where he was interacting and with the kid and everything else like that. And again, totally different. And he bounces through things.
Yeah, and
Joe, him.
One of my favourite things I remember him doing after Doctor Who was when he was in Heroes, when he played, funny enough, the Invisible Man, calling himself Claude Rains, because that doesn't mean anything, does it?
Was he a bad guy in Fast and Furious or something? What was it?
Maybe at some point, yeah.
He was like a bad guy.
Everyone's been in Fast and Furious, to be fair.
He was in. I think he was gone in 6 seconds.
Gone in 66 seconds. Yeah, that's it. Same sort of thing. Cars.
Same thing, yeah. Still for yeah.
I wonder. I always think is there a bit of that Doctor Who fan base you just never win back? I think that's things like even when you bring Russell T Davies back, if they think themselves, does this get a few people back on side? I don't know. Is that a ship that's sailed? I don't know. It's really tricky to know.
I think that's like any fan base, though. You're never going to have a full. Like, say you start from the beginning, you've got your audience. Doctor Who first series was putting in about 10 million a week, and then as time's gone, you bring on David Tennant. Most people, I like David Tennant, and then some people like, no, I prefer Christopher Eccleston. I'm not going to watch anymore. David Tennant leaves, probably one of the most popular Doctors that's ever been. And right, how do we follow this up? We're going to bring on someone who's completely unknown, pretty much. And Matt Smith. He earned his part in Doctor Who. He had to go, right, I've got so much to prove. I have to make a massive impact. Stephen Moffat, that was top writing from the very beginning. That first episode, the 11th hour, was just pure masterclass. And just that whole series. And then Peter Capaldi was a very divisive Doctor. I know a lot of people weren't keen on him being part of that show. I thought he was fantastic, and I think some of Capaldi's episodes are some of the best in the whole of Doctor Who. And then I don't say it's bad against Jodie Whittaker, because I think she is actually a really good actress and she is a good Doctor. But I think for her and for the last few series of Doctor Who, the writing has just really let the show down. I mean, it's never looked better. It looks awesome. You can see like the episodes, the budgets, they reflect what the show should be, but it's just so poor. And I think that's what I think you've got some Doctor Who fans, or you've got the whiny bitches that go, "Oh, you can't have a woman Doctor. That's not going to happen." It's like, sorry, the Master became Missy. We've had plenty of Time Lords that have gone from male to female or female to male. Oh, but you can't accept your main character doing it because whatever reason. But I don't know. I think with fans, you're never going to get people 100% happy. Like I say, just look at Star Wars for that example. That's why.
Nope, we're not going to go there.
That's why they brought back J.J. Abrams, and it was even worse.
But I think they're similar fan bases. I remember having this distinct moment when I was in the cinema watching. Must have been what was the very last number 9 of the Star Wars films, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. And I was not that impressed with it, honestly, but I sort of came out, and there was a little girl in a Rey costume came out, beaming ear to ear, and I just suddenly went, I get it. This is not for me. Like this generation of Star Wars. Like I, as a wide-eyed, like 7-8-year-old, watching Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi on a flipping loop, like that's my Star Wars, and I think maybe I feel like Star Wars and Doctor Who is the same thing. It's like it's not. I say kind of you have to go. You can either move with it or just like I say maybe just say it's not for you. That's kind of at this point. Are the BBC aiming for fans who were watching Doctor Who are they aiming for that audience who were watching in the 60s and 70s?
That's an amazing point. That's an amazing point, because I remember I was having a bitch about the Last Jedi, which I still I've watched all the Star Wars films numerous times. That one I've watched once and I can't bring myself to watching it again. But my mate said the exact same thing that you said. He said to me, he says, "Look, man, I didn't like it when I first watched it, but it's like you got to think about this. This isn't our Star Wars. This is somebody else's Star Wars. We've had ours. This is for another generation. And, once you watch it back and you sort of get it in your mind, it's like, this is, this is something different. Then you kind of make your peace with it and stuff." And I was just like, I don't know, man.
You can't replicate that. You can't. No. You're not as innocent and sort of full of wonder. It's like when I was, say when I was a kid watching those first Star Wars films, it was practically real to me. Kind of in that way, your imagination works at that age. So I think even if it's even if it's as good, it won't feel as magic. Even if it's like you can look at it logically, technically, storyline wise, it could be as good a film. It just can't be magic again. And I think the same with Doctor Who as well. If you grew up with that as a kid, 60s, 70s, like, wow, this thing's like amazing. It's got look at all these incredible creatures and things going on. It will never be. It could be. Probably you could argue that some of the modern Doctor Who, in terms of like story and effects and everything, is superior to the older stuff. I'm sure someone will shoot me for that opinion, but but I think again you'll never recapture that feeling, and I think that's what people get caught on, is that nostalgia kind of thing. Like why isn't it as good as I remember it being? It was because you were like 10 when you watched it first time.
See, that's why I like the Rise of Skywalker. It has questionable parts in it, but for me, it was the end of a journey, and it was the end of my childhood. Effectively, it was like a journey that I made, with my father, bringing me to see the Star Wars trilogy when I was a child, throughout my life, following Star Wars, and that film, for all its points and stuff, fucking Chewbacca got his medal. Stuff like that, really got me there. So it's just stuff that, from the very first bit. And, it was actually a surprisingly good sort of send off for Princess Leia / Carrie Fisher as well. And for me, it was just sort of like the culmination of a journey. And that's why I liked it. And that, me, my brother, my sister, and my brother and my sister were crying by the end of it. And my sister's husband is just looking at us going, "What the fuck are you doing?" Where it's just like obviously a lot of emotions coming through us, but it's just like sorry, Jonjo, fire away.
No, I was just gonna say, I think when you think about like you say, it's the end of a journey, but at the same time you think everyone that was involved in making that last Star Wars movie, they must have been like, for fuck's sake, whatever we do now, if we do an absolutely amazing job, we're going to get told we're not to the spirit of Star Wars. If we do everything that people ask for, then we're just pandering to fans. And not just that, but sadly you had the passing of Carrie Fisher, where Episode 9 was supposed to be her movie, whereas Episode 7 was for Harrison Ford, Episode 8 was for Mark Hamill. This was supposed to be her part, and to use what they had to bring her back to life for that movie, for what they could, to as you say, tie off this story to cap what had been a 42-year franchise, really, at that point, to go, do you know what, this is where our story ends on this side. Whatever happens with Star Wars going forward, that you've got your three trilogies. You've got basically the way I look at it is you've got the franchise that you grew up with, you've got the franchise that you knew but probably didn't give much time for, and then you've got the new generation. That's the way to look at it. Even like, I watched the prequels recently, and I think now I kind of appreciate the prequels a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I've always...
They have their moments, but...
I think I appreciate them more since I watched the animated series that fit around them, so the Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff. I think that made them...
Greater context.
That made them more of a relatable tapestry, because the films hop around a little bit. They can be quite high. They can be quite sort of sketchy in places.
So did the original trilogy, to be fair.
Yeah, but as an adult, I notice it more, I think, and so.
Yeah. So again, we come back to that issue with these films are not. It's for the new generation now, not for us.
I think the thing for me is there's always such a risk of thinking like too much, like what do the fans want? Because things like what the fans want and a great story is probably not the same thing. The fans are going to want certain elements, things to happen that may not make sense or may not be very logical, or sort of like the fans probably want a really happy ending for everybody. And it's like, well, sometimes a good story is not always a happy ending. I remember I remember thinking this at the time. Lost many years ago, if I remember, was Lost. There was a couple of characters that came in, and about series 4 or 5, and the fans were like, "Don't like those characters," and the guys who were writing Lost were like, "Okay, we'll write them out." It was like that to me is a worrying moment in like TV history. You're trying to tell a story, you're suddenly going, "We'll take them out because you don't like them." Well, you're ruining your story. You've got them somewhere.
I remember chatting to some publishers at FantasyCon last weekend, and they're saying do not write for the public. Do not write what's prevalent right now, because by the time it is published, what is right now will be 2 years ago when it comes out.
Yeah, precisely that. Yeah.
It reminds me of something that someone said around the time that the newer Star Trek stuff was coming out, and everyone was geeking up about that, about Discovery and Picard and so on. And the problem you have is that there's a certain set of fans that will always say, "We want more, but we want new." And then when you do something new, "Yeah, but I want more, but I want it more like the old stuff." And then you do it, and you do like a fan sort of worship thing. And they go, "But that's just the old stuff, but warmed up. I want something different." And whatever you do, there is a group that will hate it, find a reason to hate it, because it's not what they had up here. Yeah. It's never going to be what they had up here.
Well, it's the prime example.
Rewatch the originals.
Yeah, the prime example of sort of nostalgia, sort of being better than the reality is I went to Arcade Club the other week, so it's all the retro games in Barry, and it's all these retro games everywhere and stuff. I'm going for my friend's birthday on Friday, and you go in and you get this you just get this sort of sweet this nostalgia and all these games that me and my brother would play as kids, and oh my god, this game was so good, and then you play it and you go, this game is shit. And this game is so shit. But in your head, when you're thinking about it, you're going, my god, that was literally the best game I'd ever played in my entire life. But you play it and you're going, it has nothing to it. The graphics are
probably used to PlayStation 5 now.
Yeah, and it's just it's just so it's so crap, and you're just like, wow, it just doesn't. And I think people get that with films. In their mind, they're like, this was, when I was a child, this was the best thing ever, I loved this. But they're sort of thinking of it in a childlike form, and they're not sort of kind of think, it's not going to, what's the word? I can't even think. It's not going to translate as well when it sort of kind of, if they pay lip service to this all the time, it's just going to be a bit naff. And it's just like, so, I understand that, and I think it's just like you shouldn't play to people's, as much as like, in Rogue One, there was a lot of sort of little nods to thing. I fucking loved every single one of them. I like, this fucking, what's the name of the squad? Red Squadron were there and stuff, and they had like, the Darth Vader bits and all, Grand Moff Tarkin, having Grand Moff Tarkin, even with sort of, the CGI'd face, and even Leia with a CGI'd face, I loved it. I thought it was amazing and stuff. It was sort of little small bits, of little bits of nostalgia and stuff that were thrown in there.
But yeah, you want something that references, but without feeling as if you're completely going over the same story again.
Yeah, exactly.
Repeating history.
Yeah, but you don't want to sort of kind of do over. I think the first, the new film, not Phantom Menace, the new Star Wars film, Force Awakens, they kind of tried to be too like A New Hope, and you could see it, and then I didn't hate it, but I felt slightly let down about it. I don't know, and it was just like because it was something I'd watched before, effectively,
It's like the uncanny valley that they have with animated people, where they're not quite right, and you feel it as a bit odd.
Something slightly off.
Yeah, because you think to yourself, so this is where okay, that's not quite right, and because you have enough there for your expectation, say this should come next because you've watched the original film like 8,000 times and worn out of VHS and so on. And even, you even had that a little bit when they did the special editions, didn't you? There's a few extra bits or they changed that around a little bit. But then to have a brand new film that is so obviously pushing the same beats.
Yeah, literally everything.
Yeah, I think with Star Wars though, when that was being brought back, I think that was really the only way you could do it. You had to kind of have it as like a soft reboot. You had to go, well, look, we've got to have some things that are similar. We've got to have some traits that people are going to recognise. Yes, we bring in a few new things, but we've got to throw some of the old in it as well. And from that point, they just then went, well, from there, we can expand to this way and this way. We can go off and do this. We can now go and do that. And, Disney are going to give you every single property of Star Wars that you can get until you realise, oh yes, Joe, what we can actually do our own Star Wars subscription. Never mind Disney Plus, we can actually do Star Wars Plus. There we go.
They should have done. They should have done the Yuzan Vong storyline after the original. They should have gone into that because that's like hardcore.
That was pretty brutal.
Yeah, they should have done that. Yeah, that would have been like, and they didn't, that's completely different. And it's just like force sensitive fucking genocidal. It's basically, what I love about that is it's that it sort of gives more of an edge to the Emperor and the Empire because the Death Stars, the sort of inference is the Death Stars were built to prevent them from invading and destroying.
All those big weapons and the obsession with super weapons was always about the destruction of the world ships. So before the Yuzhan Vong could get a foothold.
Yeah,
but no one knew because the Emperor being the Emperor. I think also that's part of the reason why everyone found it so hard to deal with the new Luke. Was that in the legend stuff, they got used to this Luke that grew up and had a family and saw things and grew in a very different way to what we got faced with, which was very disappointing in some ways.
Very disappointing. I can't reconcile the Last Jedi look. It's just like, it's just this guy. This is not my Luke Skywalker. I'm just like, what is this guy? And people try and justify it. And it's like, no, I'm not having it.
It's not for you, man.
No, I'm not having it. It's not having it.
Do you know? Going a bit off topic, but it will come back to Star Wars in a way. Have you guys been watching on Disney Plus, watching the What If Marvel series?
Yes, so good. Last episode, just watched it last night. Awesome.
Now, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there was or if you've read it, actually, you would have heard it. There was a Star Wars comic that came out years ago, which was kind of like its own version of a What If, where the trilogy plays out like it should, but it has one key change. And I read all 3 books some time ago, and I thought they were brilliant. So in what is effectively A New Hope, the trigger is when Luke fires into the Death Star, it doesn't blow up. Okay. So, you have all that suspense. It's like, oh, no, the Death Star's still there. So effectively, they lose. The Empire is still going. Leia gets kidnapped and brainwashed into becoming a servant of the dark side. The Empire is now seen as this, like, this great force across the galaxy. And then from that point, Luke still goes on his journey to become obviously a Jedi. He has his interactions with Han Solo than what you would have had in the original trilogy. He still goes to Yoda. It's really good. And then there is episode 5 where they're on Hoth, but Luke dies before he's actually saved by Han Solo. So, the galaxy is now going, well, shit, who's actually supposed to protect us now? Because, the supposed chosen one, the boy is gone. So, yeah, it was a really good series. If you've not had the chance to, I have to try and look up what it was called again. I know I've got the book somewhere, but I don't really want to be pulling through a load of boxes to try and find it. But seriously, they were really good stories. And I really think that's going to be one of the next things that Disney Plus are going to do. They'll do their own Star Wars.
Well, they've done recently an anime version of Star Wars called Star
Visions.
Visions.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I quite enjoyed that, actually.
I'm about halfway through that, I must admit. But it's very different because it takes that very different influences. It's interesting.
It is. It's a great anthology series. It's especially, I really like episode 2, which was, because obviously watching the first one, it had that very 1950s kind of style to it, almost like a 13 Assassins kind of feel. And then that second episode is very, very weird, very poppy, very vibrant and fun, and even has Boba Fett in it, because that always is a winning formula. But having the one about basically about a boy band in space, it's crazy. But I did love that. That was really fun. But Star Wars What If, there we go. That's going to be the next series on Disney Plus.
Cool.
Give it time. There's a few bobs we made. Someone will do it.
Okay.
Sure they will.
So we'll leave it there. We'll just one more note on the Ghost Story festival. Tell us a bit more about it, when it's happening and stuff.
Who's coming apart from me?
Yeah. Who's coming apart from you? Yes, absolutely, yes. So we're running 26th to 28th of November. So we start about Friday lunchtime, finishing sort of Sunday mid-afternoon. We've got 2 days here at Quad in Derby. Our third day is across the way at the Museum of Making, which recently reopened, should I say. Really exciting to be working with them. Over the weekend, we've got among our headliners, Anita Frank is going to talk about her book, The Lost Ones, from last year. Fabulous ghost story that was. Neil Springs, one of the best kind of known ghost story writers around. If anyone saw his ITV series, the Harry Price Ghost Hunter, that was quite popular. We've got Caroline Lee, whose books have done incredibly well. AJ West, his new book looks absolutely phenomenal. It's going to be a really big debut, I think. The Spirit Engineer, that's a really exciting one to keep an eye out for. Wrapping up with an M.R. James theatre performance. So it's going to be a packed weekend, absolutely loads going on. If anyone's interested in taking a look, probably easiest place to find us is on Twitter, where we are at UKGS Festival. It's very hard to find a better Twitter handle than that, but UKGS Festival. Or if you head to the Derby Quad website, it's www.derbyquad.co.uk, and you look for the Ghost Story Festival, you'll find it. You'll find it from there. You can do a weekend pass, or we've got tickets to individual events available as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, I might well be looking to add some more events, because I've had a lot of demand so far, which is really great. So going to be looking to expand the program a bit, which is really exciting too. So yes, you can hold me to that if anyone's listening and coming along. If we're adding some more events in the very near future,
awesome.
Should be a real lot of fun. So went really well in 2019, and buzzing to be back. Was it back doing an event and having people around, and just getting some authors up, and should be really, really fun. And so it's perfect timing of the year, hopefully, to get you in that Christmas spooky wintry mood. So
Awesome sauce. Brilliant.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, man. Great having you on again.
Thank you very much. No, absolutely great to chat. It was always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so that's us for tonight. It's been great fun. I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ray Allison.
Good night, everyone.
Mark Canty.
Good night, all.
Jonjo Cosgrove.
Take care, people.
And our guest, Alex Davis.
Good night, everyone. Sleep tight.
Night, everybody. Bye.